I want to bring in Ohio's former Republican Governor John Kasich, who's an MSNBC political analyst. Lars Anderson is a former senior official for FEMA under President Obama. Good to have both of you here. So, Governor, what's your reaction generally to what you've heard and seen from Donald Trump today?
Well, look, I think that we want to have government move at the speed of business. And the fact is that one of the frustrations that communities have is we don't know when they're coming. We don't know when they're going to give us answers. I actually went through something, Chris, it didn't involve FEMA, but it involved the CDC. We thought we might have an Ebola problem out here. We couldn't get them to show up. I ended up having to charter an airplane to get them to come because they couldn't figure out how to get to Columbus, Ohio from Washington. It makes you tear your hair out. And so I think the idea that we would look at FEMA, try to figure out how we can make it move faster, and they have their work to do. Turning out everything over to the states, that's not necessarily good because states are always going to ask for whatever they can get. So I think a good balance where the state does its part, but at the same time that FEMA moves as quickly as is possible and to get some of these things resolved, that's the way we ought to go. Every one of these agencies can stand a little kick in the backside and to get moving a little bit faster. That's my view.
Yeah, so two things can be true. If I hear what you're saying is right, and I think most people would agree, government can get better. Bureaucracy can untangle a bit. I think most Americans would agree with that. But is there a worry about throwing out the baby with the bathwater to disparage people who work for FEMA? Is that a helpful idea to suggest maybe that we get rid of FEMA altogether? Is that the answer?
Again, that's kind of rhetoric. We don't know what the plan is. What I suspect at the end of the day for people who have been involved in this, I think you're going to see an effort being made by people throughout FEMA to, try to move faster. We have so much bureaucracy, so many rules and regulations, trimming those down. Because, Chris, if I'm a governor of the state of Ohio and we get some horrific disaster, I don't want to be sitting around every day being delayed in terms of what I can do. I'm going to need the federal help, and I want them to move quickly. And look, nobody's interested. I'm not interested in saying, we go and belittle people. That doesn't make sense. But I think everybody in these organizations can say, hey, we can do a little bit better. I think that makes perfect sense.
Lars, I want to play a little bit more of what the president, and we can see him now with folks. He's shaking hands and talking to some of the residents there. Here's what he said just a little while ago about FEMA.
FEMA just hasn't done the job. And we're looking at the whole concept of FEMA. I like, frankly, the concept when North Carolina gets hit, the governor takes care of it. When Florida gets hit, the governor takes care of it, meaning the state takes care of it. To have a group of people come in from an area that don't even know where they're going in order to solve immediately a problem is something that never worked for me.
Look, Trump is not alone in suggesting states take more responsibility. Craig Fugate, as you know, was FEMA administrator during the Obama administration. He's also suggested states needed to do more. That said, where's the line? Where's the difference between doing more and doing it all? But is the president potentially on the right track?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think, as the governor said previously, look, every government agency can do some sort of reform. There's always room for improvement. But I think if you look at the capability of the capacity of states when it comes to these large multi-billion-dollar disasters, the states just don't have the funding. And you never really know where these disasters are going to hit, whether they're man-made, whether they're natural. So you really need a federal response. And I would differ with the president in that when FEMA goes into a disaster, the FEMA takes the lead from the governor of the state. So saying that, FEMA comes in and takes charge, that's just not true. FEMA is always working hand in hand with the state authorities and really leading the federal effort, but on behalf of the governor. So I would disagree with the president there.
Well, he also said federal assistance should, and I'm quoting him here, go through us instead of through FEMA. And he suggested that could cut costs in half. Does that make sense to you as someone who worked on the inside?
Well, what is us? I mean, the FEMA is the federal government. He did not
clarify what us is.
Yeah, I have no idea what he's talking about. I mean, FEMA is us. FEMA is the American people. FEMA is the government. So I don't understand what he's talking about when he says the money should go through us. I mean, if he's talking about the money should flow directly to the states, there's an issue there in terms of capacity. I do think the governor was right when he said earlier, look, after Hurricane Katrina, FEMA went through a major reform. I think that FEMA is always looking at lessons learned and always looking for ways to improve. And I think that's the case here. I think after these wildfires, after the horrible floods in North Carolina, FEMA is always doing a review and looking at how can we do things better? How can we do things faster? FEMA deploys, when we know a hurricane is coming, FEMA deploys supplies, personnel ahead of the storm. And it's those types of things that the federal response helps with. These disasters don't hit red America or blue America. They hit America, and FEMA's there for all Americans.
I think to that point, Governor, both the president and House Speaker Mike Johnson have suggested that federal aid may depend on state policies. He said, quote, when state and local officials make foolish policy decisions that make the disaster exponentially worse, we need to factor that in. The governor of Louisiana, one of the states that has benefited most from federal aid in recent years, says it's nothing new to have strings attached. But is there a concern that puts political considerations above the well-being of individual Americans? Would it make you nervous, let's say, as governor, for the feds to suggest they know better what your state needs than you do?
Well, I think there's a lot of cooperation that can happen, Chris, believe it or not. Let me give you an example. I remember in the old days when there was flooding down in the, on the coast, down in places like Louisiana, where they were building homes in areas that they knew were going to be affected. And I can remember conversations with people saying, hey, shouldn't there be some change here? So an ability and when we look at California now, we know there's a lot of things that people are considering, a variety of things in order to protect their homes, and what do we do with the brush, and how do we do these burns and all that stuff. I think all that needs to be discussed, because nobody wants to have a natural disaster happen if it can be prevented. So this has been a long-going discussion. Should, in fact, you be able to build something out, in an area where it's going to get wiped out, then the government has to come in and help bail you out? I mean, it's an ongoing discussion. Maybe we can do better at that. But look, when we did the budget, when I was working to balance the budget, we were always looking not so much to slash and cut, but to improve. There's so much that can be improved. It can be improved in business. It can be improved in government. How do you make things work better? By thinking differently. Can you use technology? Do you need this certain rule or regulation? That's how you can have success. That's how we balanced the budget 4 years in a row. It's how we fixed Ohio. Smart thinking, cooperation, state, local, feds, all of them together. What we worry about today is that are we capable of that? Because there's so much polarization. But these kind of disasters tend to bring people together, and attach strings to what they need to do in California would be a big mistake. And I'm not really hearing that anymore. That wouldn't be good.